tell us a little bit about your adventures. What are you up to when you're not on Newsmax or traveling the country?
I am traveling the country and back here in Idaho to talk about this little issue. And if you saw my shirt here, Convention of States, and we're working very hard to just let people know what this is all about and why in this particular time where the government has gotten so out of control and neither political party seems to have the desire to do anything about our fiscal situation, which is becoming, we're going to spend almost $700 billion on interest this year. $700 billion on interest, which is more than we spend on almost any federal program. I mean, this is even Social Security. I'm not even sure Social Security is that much. I mean, this is a serious problem. It's only going to get worse. They're talking over the next 10 years of the deficit of the debt increasing by $25 trillion. I mean, it's at some point when's this house of cards going to fall apart? And no one in Washington is going to do anything about it. One of the neat things that happened recently was Mike Johnson, Mike is a longtime friend of mine, someone who I've known for years, and who, after Kevin McCarthy got voted out, I went on Newsmax and said, the guy who's going to eventually, not going to be nominated right away, but the guy eventually is going to get this speakership is Mike Johnson. And so I was talking about
How did you know that?
So Mike is a friend, and I know a lot of folks in the House. I've been around Washington a long time, and so you've been, in and out. And the kind of person that wins this race, when you have one side, I knew there would be someone like a Jim Jordan come up, and I haven't mentioned that. There would be someone from the right, because the right, knocked Humpty Dumpty off the wall here.
No, your team, the right.
Yeah, my team.
Yes.
Well, but no.
You knocked off Humpty Dumpty.
You
would have been there with them.
I don't think I would have been with Matt Gaetz. No, right. I would not have been. Because you can't knock Humpty Dumpty off the wall and not have a plan as to what's going to happen. And they had no plan. And that's just irresponsible. And we saw the mess that occurred. But I knew that they would nominate someone of their own, which they did, and they'd try to. In that kind of mess, I went back to the mess after the Newt Gingrich speakership, and they picked a guy named Denny Hastert. And you'd say, well, who's Denny? Nobody ever heard of Denny Hastert. Why? Because everybody liked Denny Hastert. Denny was a conservative, but he was nice to everybody, and everybody respected him, and he was just someone that had developed relationships. Mike is that kind of guy. Mike, as you saw, I mean, there's such a genuineness to him. He is who he is. But he's a kind person. He gets along with moderates because he's not a Gaetz that sort of wants to wring your neck if you don't agree with him. And also he's really smart and he's very articulate. And he's not been afraid to take on the tough issues, which means that the right loves him and the moderates in the party respect him and like him and trust him. And so I didn't see anyone else in the Congress that had that type of relationships. And I said, eventually they're just going to settle on him because they can't. The right, the swamp, if you will, the Scalises, the Emmers, the folks like that who were in the leadership. We're never gonna win because the folks on the right would never tolerate just another Kevin McCarthy, if you will. And Johnson is vice chairman of the caucus or something, which is way down the line, not really part of the boys' club, and it just made sense to me, and it worked out that way. But the interesting thing is, the reason I brought it up is that Mike Johnson was the lead sponsor of Convention of States in Louisiana. And we actually, you can go on Convention of States Action and you'll see a video of him giving a really compelling 4 or 5 minute talk on the floor of the Louisiana legislature. And I think Mike, candidly, I would not be surprised if Mike, understand, because we've talked about this, he understands that the problems can't be solved in Washington and that Washington needs a boss. It needs someone to be accountable to. They're accountable to the people. That's great. Except, you're always accountable to your customer, if you will, at work. But it's nice to have a boss tell you how to do things, right? You'd like to think everybody is just going to do what's best for the customer, that you serve. But, it doesn't work in business really particularly well, and it doesn't work in politics. You always have to have someone who holds you accountable. Mm-hmm. And voters do that, but that's not their job. I mean, it's not their full-time job to hold legislators accountable. They have lives, families, everything else. Whereas if you step up at a convention of states and you put yourself on top of the food chain and you say to Congress and the president, someone you have to be accountable to is now exercising its constitutional prerogative to put constraints on you, that to me is the game changer.
But when you had a staff, you have been, one of the 100, the elite,
the club. Yeah.
And we have Senator Crapo here, who is a deficit hawk, who's been talking about this for years.
He has.
Why aren't we doing something about the deficit? Obviously, you're all very smart. Your old crew, the crew you hung out with, all very smart. At the top of your game, this is your job. So why aren't they addressing the debt?
Because it's hard. Because once people get used to receiving government money, it's really hard to take it away and not suffer political backlash. I served 16 years in the House and Senate. I don't recall ever someone coming into my office and saying, take this benefit that I get away from me, or cut this benefit. I've never heard anybody on Social Security say, we should do less on Social Security. I've never heard anybody on Medicare that's saying we should reduce benefits in Medicaid. Never heard anybody on Medicaid. You just go on down the line. No farmer who says we should do less farming subsidy. Every federal program is there because there's a group of people who want it, and those people vote. And as a result, politicians look, I did welfare reform, which was I managed the bill on the floor of the Senate as a freshman. I actually helped write the Contract with America bill when I was in the House in 1993 and 4.
Wait a minute, the era of big government's over? I remember that.
That's right. The era of big government is over under Bill Clinton. And, thinking about a Democrat saying that today would be ridiculous. And, and so I actually did that. And the only way we got that passed, and this is what people don't realize. And I tried to do the same thing. And I weighed in actually fairly heavily after McCain torched Mitch McConnell on Obamacare and repealing Obamacare. So I actually came and met with a group of senators and spent 6-8 months trying to get this revived and came close. We came within another vote. McCain screwed us again. But the bottom line is the only way we did it, and this was what I was suggesting for healthcare, is you have to lock in the current spending. Just say, okay, we're not going to cut anything. But in the future, we're going to turn this program, which is a federal program, we're going to give it to the states. And you can do that with Medicaid easily. You're going to give it because the states already run the Medicaid program. So it's the Medicaid program, not Medicare, which is for seniors, but Medicaid.
Right. And the only reason why I'm showing you this goofy face that only you can see,
yes,
is that the states have become so dependent on Joe Biden money.
Right. I get it. But the point is they put up money for Medicaid. A big chunk of the state budget is for Medicaid. Not Medicaid expansion, which some states do, and I think Idaho is done, which is mostly federal. But most states, it depends. Some states are, like Mississippi, get 75% of their Medicaid money from the state. Some states like Connecticut get 30% because it's a wealthier state. But all states put money in in Medicaid and run the Medicaid program. And so what my suggestion was, as we did in welfare, which is welfare was a federal state combination. We put block grants out to the states, didn't in fact increase the money in the first couple years, and then froze it for many years. So instead of going up 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% every year, you just froze the block grant and let the states deal with it. Because there's no way the federal government's going to do it. And the states, because they have to balance their budget, are forced to do it. So when you give them money, you give them the flexibility to be more efficient at the state level. And the states that were efficient in welfare, for example, I remember the state of Wisconsin, 5 years after the welfare reform went into place, the rolls in Wisconsin went down 93%. And by the way, we put that block grant in place and we froze it in 1994 after 3 years. Do you know that block grant has never been increased? I'm going to repeat that. Since 1997 or 98, the block grant it's called TANF, Transitional Assistance for Needy Families, that block grant has never been increased, and you never hear states running to the federal government saying we need more money. Why? Because we gave them the flexibility to deal with the problem. So there is an answer here, but again, you need leadership. and you need majorities. You need strong majorities in the House and Senate to get something like this passed. And right now, since 1994, we really haven't had strong majorities and a president to get that done.
Let's go to
let's do that.
AJ in Caldwell with Senator Santorum on KIDO Talk Radio. Hello, AJ.
Hey, Senator Santorum, thank you for all the great work that you've done for years, and you're with a man that we treasure here in the Treasure Valley, Kevin. And so,
as you should.
A question for you, though. On the Convention of States, would it, in the practice of the overreactive federal water rights for farmers, and would it also allow us to do our own state funding as far as perhaps drilling for oil and be kind of separated away from the federal oversight that is really killing us through the EPA?
Yeah, the answer to that is amendments could be proposed to limit the power of the federal government to regulate in those areas. We had a mock convention in Williamsburg a couple of months ago, and we had members from 49, delegations from 49 of the 50 states that were there. Most of them were either current or former state legislators. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that was proposed was a limitation on federal ownership of public lands within a state. And so that just gives you... Yeah, that just gives you an idea of the types of amendments. But remember, and this is why I caution people who, particularly from the West, because there's so many issues that the West has with the federal government that are unique to the West. You got to get 38 state legislatures to ratify any amendment that comes out of this convention. And so you have to have something that appeals to all those states east of the Mississippi that don't have the issues that you folks have with respect to the federal government. And so I would suspect, and this is why I've always said, don't expect big changes out of convention states. No huge change is going to happen because you got to get 38 state legislators, 3/4 of the state legislature. It's the highest bar in the country anywhere. There's Idaho doesn't have a high bar anywhere when it comes in. No, most states don't. So this is really hard to do, and that's why people say, "Oh, all these terrible things can happen." No, they can't. You can need 38 states to ratify anything that comes out of this convention, and that means, as a Democrat, if it's a quote liberal proposal, which wouldn't come out of this convention, you'd need 12 Republican-controlled states to vote for this. And if you're a Republican, a conservative one, you're probably going to need 4 or 5 Democratic states to vote for this. So it's going to be hard. And so I always say the most important things that can come out of this convention is having the convention, and not Sorry,
I was going to say, but one thing that seems good to me though is that the state would have a larger voice because the individual people in the states, it wouldn't be such like a federal nebulous thing that they're dealing with because the federal government has oversight of everything, but the individual state representatives would really be on the hook to do, like in this state, when the farmers start yelling at, certain senators in this Idaho state government, boy, they better listen because this is part of that. It's directly to them. They can't just shovel it off and say, "Well,
it's the federal government,
federal oversight." We can't do anything.
Amen. And there may be some in the state legislature who don't want to do this because they don't want the responsibility. I mean, I hate to say that, but I think there's part of that look, if we are actually if the state legislature is actually at the top of the food chain. That's why I said it's important just to do this because it reestablishes the states as the boss of the federal government. And that's the way it always was up until, frankly, about 100 years ago. Things flipped when the 17th Amendment passed and allowed popular election of senators. Remember, United States senators were appointed by the state legislature, and it was put in there by the founders to control the size and scale of Washington. Well, that was removed, and Washington has exploded since. So there's one other provision left for the states to reassert its primacy that was intended by the founders. People say, "Oh, we want to restore the Constitution. We want to live by the Constitution." Well, then live by the original principles of the Constitution, where the state was the one that actually was supposed to be where the power rested, not the federal government, and give the states this power again by using the Convention of States.
Yeah, well, God bless you both, and Idaho, Hosanna.
All right. Thank you very much. Let's go to Guy in Eagle with Senator Santorum on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Guy.
Good morning. Rick Santorum, Senator, thank you so much for what you're doing for Convention of States.
Thank you.
I'm a volunteer since I moved here to Idaho back in 2016, and I really appreciate what you're doing for us.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about for years how disenfranchised I've been, and I see what's going on in Washington as a game of influence and not really of merit. And it has to do with the money that flows in there. And it's gotten me to the point where I'm tired of complaining, and so that's why I joined Convention of States as a volunteer. And before you came on, Tom Muntz was on, and he is with JBS, and he sounded kind of defeated with complaints about the UN and globalists and such, and I see the way I was similar to what he is saying, and there's really, as Kevin mentioned, there's really no solution that they can offer. And I really see this Convention of States effort and having a convention as being the one way that we can have a solution to the problem.
Well, I
wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And by the way, look, I always remind people, and I'll say this to Mr. Muntz and to anybody out there who has had or has questions about Convention of State. I was with you. I was not a supporter of Convention of States, came on the scene about 10, 12 years ago. It's only been the last couple of years that I actually have changed my position on this for a variety of different reasons. And I'm not alone. This week, the Heritage Foundation, which is the preeminent think tank in Washington, D.C., I mean, they are leading the charges and working with the Freedom Caucus and working with a lot of folks in the conservative circles in Washington. They actually came out and they were uncommitted, ambivalent at best on this, but several of their scholars came and attended the Williamsburg Convention a couple of months ago and learned more. And that's what I keep saying. The more you learn about this, the better. They learned more about it, and they came out with a policy position for the first time and said that they are now not only for it, but they are going to be actively pursuing, trying to get states to ratify this. They're going to work closely with us. And the one big thing that really flipped them was a Supreme Court decision that happened in 2020 in the state of having to do with the state of Washington and the faithful electors for president in 2016. 3 of them voted not the way the state voted at the Electoral College, and the state pulled them back, withdrew them, and had other people go and cast the correct vote. There was a lawsuit that said, "Oh, you can't do that," and on a 9-0 decision written by Justice Kagan, it said that states agents of the state can be restricted as to how they operate. The state can, in fact, dictate to them that they can or can't do things. So it's called a faithful delegate election bill. Well, we can do that. In fact, have been doing that in several states since then with the Article 5 convention. So people say, "Oh, well, these delegates are going to go there and they're going to go crazy." You can actually pass a resolution, and we're encouraging the Idaho legislature to do so. And like I said, about 10, 12 states have already done it, that says that if you go there and you don't abide by the limitations of that convention, and which are very specific to limit the power, scope, and spending of the federal government, if you don't live by that, you can be withdrawn. And in fact, several of the states allow you to be prosecuted with criminal penalties if you do that. So anybody who says that we can't control the convention, that's just not true. It can be controlled, and the power is within the state legislature to do it. That was enough to get Heritage from we're a little unsure, we don't know how this will work, to full-throated support of it and saying it's the thing that has to be done to constrain Washington.
And Guy, thank you for the call. More coming up next with